Did you know that just before the '96 draft, Kobe called the Nets and threatened them not to draft him?
You know who I wanted to pick. I'd still be coaching, by the way, in the NBA if I had you.
Or that if a coin flip had landed differently in 1979, Michael Jordan would have never become a Chicago Bull? These are the 13 moments in NBA history with the biggest butterfly effects. If these monumental moments swung in another direction, the NBA would have changed forever. The NBA Draft Lottery was introduced in 1985, with the New York Knicks famously winning its first iteration, selecting Patrick Ewing with its first overall pick. But before the lottery, the draft process was vastly different. In the early years of the NBA draft, teams selected players until they ran out of prospects. The 1960 and 1968 drafts went as long as 21 rounds. And teams used to draft players that weren't even basketball players, just because they could. For example, the legendary NFL running back Jim Brown was selected in the 9th round of the 1957 draft. Caitlyn Jenner, then known as Bruce, was picked in the 7th round of the 1977 draft. And Carl Lewis was selected in 1984 as the 208th overall pick. Another oddity, which would look completely insane today, was the fact that the winner of the draft lottery was decided with a coin toss. From 1966 until 1984, the worst teams in each conference flipped a coin to determine who would obtain the first overall draft pick. If the coin flipped the other way, some of the most legendary players of all time would have never played for their franchises, which would completely alter the course of NBA history. In 1969, the Bucks won the coin toss against the Phoenix Suns, which allowed them to take the greatest collegiate player ever, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then known as Lou Alcindor. 10 years later, the Lakers and the Bulls flipped a coin, and the Lakers won, after which they drafted Magic Johnson with the first pick. If the Bulls had won, there would be no Showtime Lakers, and Michael Jordan would have never played in Chicago, since the Bulls would certainly have become a winning team with Magic, and they would have never had the chance to get a high draft pick in 1984. But just 2 years after Jordan got drafted, another collegiate superstar was coming to the NBA, and many analysts predicted that he could be even better than MJ. It was Len Bias, who dominated at the University of Maryland, averaging 23.2 points and 7 rebounds per game as a senior, shooting 55% from the field and 87% from the free throw line. Bias was almost as athletic as Jordan, but he was also 6'8", strong as an ox, with phenomenal footwork and a silky jumper. The Boston Celtics, who had just won the 1986 NBA title, had the 2nd overall pick in the draft, thanks to a 1984 trade with the Sonics. When the Cleveland Cavaliers selected center Brad Daugherty with the first pick, the Celtics selected Bias, celebrating like they won another championship.
The Boston Celtics select Len Bias of the University of Maryland.
I'm happy to be picked by Boston. I'm going to try to go out there and play the best I can.
He's the guy we wanted, and we got him.
With Bird, Parish, and McHale still in their prime, the addition of Bias was supposed to make the Celtics instant title favorites for the next 5 years, and would almost certainly yield at least 1 or 2 more championships to Boston. But this dream scenario never materialized due to one of the biggest tragedies in NBA history.
Major County emergency.
I'd like to have an ambulance come. Football room. 1103 Washington Hall. It's an emergency. It's Len Bias.
Good evening. Sports fans and others in the Washington area and all around the country tonight are mourning the loss of Len Bias.
Just 2 days after the draft, Len Bias passed away following a cocaine overdose while celebrating with his friends on the Maryland campus.
Mr. Bias died of cocaine intoxication, which interrupted the normal electrical activity of his brain, which controlled his heartbeats.
If that tragic night never happened, Larry Bird would probably retire with 5 or 6 championships, which would reshape the GOAT debate forever. But one player who is constantly in GOAT debates...
Did you just say into a microphone that LeBron James would beat Michael Jordan in a one-on-one
match?
One-on-one?
...changed NBA history forever in 2010.
The answer to the question everybody wants to know. LeBron, what's your decision?
In this fall, man, this is very tough. In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
Not only did LeBron's decision set him up for 4 finals trips and 2 NBA championships with the Miami Heat, it also set a new trend in the NBA and sports in general. When the King said he was taking his talents to South Beach, it was the dawn of a new way of doing business in sports: the player empowerment. Before that, it was the owners, general managers, and agents who dictated trades and orchestrated the salary cap. But when LeBron made his decision, he did so in cahoots with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, setting a precedent for years to come. From that moment on, the players realized they could choose where they wanted to go, even if they were still under contract. The first example was Carmelo Anthony, who exercised his superstar power to get traded to the New York Knicks.
Everyone knew that Carmelo wanted to end up in New York, but Denver kept holding out and pushing the Knicks to put more and more in.
You know, it was a dream come true for myself, and I felt like I wanted to be part of an organization, part of a team who had some upside. And
Dwight Howard did the same thing a year later, ending up with the Lakers.
I think it's time for change for my life. I'm just looking forward to the challenge, being great here in LA, and I'm looking forward to the future.
And by the end of the decade, we saw a plethora of superstars get traded to a team of their preference, like when Kawhi forced his way out of San Antonio.
So he quit his way out of town. He didn't play out his deal.
Right.
He forced his way out of the deal.
I have no regrets. I want to focus on this team and just stay in the present time and not look back.
And then when he signed with the Clippers, he also organized a trade to get Paul George sent to LA with him.
Paul is always a player that I wanted to play with. You know, now we're on the Clippers, and it's just, I think we got something special. We can make history here.
KD did it multiple times, as well as James Harden. And for better or worse, we now live in the era of player empowerment, where superstars dictate where and with whom they're going to play. Now, back in the 90s, getting superstars mostly happened organically through the draft. And when Spurs superstar David Robinson broke his foot early in the 96-97 season, the Spurs were desperate, as their championship hopes went down the drain with his injury. But this turned out to be the biggest stroke of luck in franchise history. With Robinson missing basically the entire season, and injuries to other key pieces such as Chuck Person and Sean Elliott, San Antonio ended the year with an awful 20-62 record in the first season with Greg Popovich as the head coach. With the second best odds in the draft lottery, the Spurs were lucky enough to get the number 1 pick, which they then used to select the best power forward of all time.
The San Antonio Spurs select Tim Duncan from Wake Forest University.
With Tim Duncan at the helm, the Spurs never had a losing season. In fact, they never won less than 60% of regular season games. During Duncan's 19-year tenure with San Antonio, the Spurs never missed the playoffs, they made the conference finals 9 times and the finals 6 times, winning 5 NBA championships. And if David Robinson didn't get hurt, Duncan probably would have gotten drafted by the Vancouver Grizzlies, and the Spurs might still be ringless. But after Duncan retired in 2016, the Spurs still won 61 games the next year because they had the second coming of Tim Duncan, nicknamed the Claw. Like Timmy, Kawhi was never much of a talker, but on the court, he was one of the best two-way players in the game. After he won the Defensive Player of the Year in 2016 and finished second in MVP voting, Kawhi further developed his offensive game in 2017, averaging 25.5 points per game on near 50-40-90 shooting splits. But in the 2017 playoffs, Leonard upped the ante again with 27.7 points per game, 7.8 rebounds, 4.6 assists, and 1.7 steals. With those enormous hands, a near-automatic mid-range jumper, and stellar perimeter defense, Kawhi looked like Michael Jordan 2.0, with even better efficiency. In the 12 games of the 2017 playoffs, Kawhi shot an unreal 52% from the field, 46% for 3, and 93% from the free throw line. In Game 1 of the West Conference Finals, the Spurs faced the mighty Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, a team that many consider to be the best of all time. However, it wasn't KD, Steph, or Klay who was the best player on the floor in Game 1. It was Kawhi, who played the best game of his life, scoring 26 points in just 23 minutes of action. Even though the Warriors were heavy favorites, the Spurs crushed them in the first half with a 20-point advantage. But then, early in the third quarter, a disaster. While Kawhi was raising for a jump shot, the Warriors center Zaza Pachulia planted his foot in Leonard's landing area, and Kawhi landed on it, grimacing in pain. Kawhi then made both free throws to put the Spurs up by 23 before limping off the court. And while we didn't know it then, it was the last time we'd see Leonard fully healthy. Without their best player, the Spurs couldn't hold on to the lead, losing 113-111.
All I care about is Kawhi's not there. It makes me very, very angry.
Shortly after, when Leonard was subsequently ruled out of the series, the Spurs had no chance against the Golden State juggernaut, losing the next 3 games by a combined 62 points. But getting swept was the least of their problems. After Kawhi hurt his ankle, he developed another injury in the same leg, and this time it was his quad. Leonard eventually came back, but after just 9 games in the 2018 season, he was shut down indefinitely, citing that the Spurs rushed his return and didn't give him proper treatment.
Well, we only have X number of games left in the season, and he's still not ready to go. I'll be surprised if he gets back this year.
The mistreatment of his injury caused a rift between Kawhi and the Spurs, and Leonard stopped answering answering his phone. Nobody from the organization could reach him, not even Coach Pop.
You'll have to ask Kawhi and his group that question. So far they say that he's not ready to go.
Kawhi was supposed to be the next Tim Duncan, the face of the franchise for the next decade, but instead, he forced the Spurs to trade him to Toronto. With the Raptors, Kawhi still wasn't fully healthy, but when he played, he looked like the best player on the planet, leading the Canadian team to their first NBA title. And in the process, Kawhi likely changed the course of another NBA franchise when his 4-bounce buzzer beater went in and sent the Philadelphia 76ers to Cancun. If he didn't make that shot and the Sixers won the game in overtime, they could have gone all the way. And if they did, they probably would have kept Jimmy Butler. That one shot likely altered the history of 3 NBA franchises: the Raptors, the Sixers, and the Miami Heat. But while trading a player who wins the Finals MVP the next season must hurt, what about trading a player who wins 11 championships? Before the 1956 NBA draft, the Celtics coach and GM Red Auerbach knew that Bill Russell was by far the best player in the draft, but the Celtics had the second best record in the previous year and had no chance to get him. But Red was a man who didn't understand the word no. Determined to get his man, Auerbach first traded All-Star Ed Macauley and Cliff Hagan to the St. Louis Hawks to move up in the draft and secure the second pick. See, the Hawks didn't want to draft Russell because their owner was racist, so they were glad to make the deal with the Celtics. Still, that barely solved anything because the Rochester Royals also wanted Russell, and they were picking number 1. But then Auerbach's genius really shined through. Because he knew the Royals were in financial trouble, Red thought of a devious little plan to get the top pick. Since the Celtics owner also owned the Ice Capades, a hit traveling ice skating show, Auerbach convinced Rochester to pass on Russell in exchange for several Ice Capades performances over the years. Somehow, both the Hawks and the Royals accepted those deals, and Russell became a Celtic, where he would win 11 championships in the next 13 seasons. So, if we're talking about history-changing trades, that's gotta be the biggest one. But the Rochester Royals weren't the only team that had to trade the best player in the world due to financial difficulties. In 1976, when the ABA League collapsed, the NBA agreed to accept 4 of the remaining 6 ABA teams: the Denver Nuggets, Indiana Pacers, New York Nets, and San Antonio Spurs. Unlike the other 3 ABA teams entering the NBA, who played in cities without any existing NBA team, the Nets were required by the NBA to pay an encroachment fee of $4.8 million to the New York Knicks. The Nets owner didn't have the money and was faced with a hard choice: to sell the team or its best player. He ultimately chose the latter, selling the contract of Julius Erving to the Philadelphia 76ers. Dr. J was a reigning 3-time ABA MVP, a 2-time Finals MVP, and without him in the lineup, the Nets went from ABA champions to the worst team in the NBA. And with the Sixers, Dr. J would become one of the most iconic players of all time, making the All-Star team in each of his 11 seasons, and helping the team win the 1983 NBA championship. And even though that deal was unfair to the Nets, it wasn't the worst trade of that era. That honor belongs to the Golden State Warriors, who got bamboozled by Red Auerbach and the Celtics in a deal that was dubbed the Steal of the Century. Red convinced the Golden State Warriors to trade the 3rd overall pick and future Hall of Fame center Robert Parish in exchange for the 1st and 13th pick.
Well, they got Parish, the center from Golden State, who's a fine young player, has always had a lot of promise. And
Parish was a borderline all-star, averaging 17 points, 11.5 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks in his last 2 seasons with the Warriors. And at the age of 26, he was just entering his prime. But the Warriors really wanted that 1st pick, and they used it to select Joe Barry Carroll, a talented 7-foot center out of Purdue.
Golden State selects 7-foot, 230-pound Purdue star Joe Barry Carroll.
With the 3rd pick, Auerbach selected the player he most wanted in the draft, Kevin McHale, who would be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and the trio of Parish, McHale, Bird became arguably the greatest front court in NBA history. And even though Joe Barry Carroll averaged 20 points and 8 rebounds in his 7 seasons with the Warriors, including 1 All-Star selection, he was just empty calories, more interested in his numbers than team success. Nicknamed Joe Barely Cares, Carroll led the Warriors to the playoffs only once, while the Celtics were making the finals and winning championships. And just 4 years later, the Portland Trail Blazers made a mistake similar to the Warriors, betting on the wrong player in the draft. The 1984 NBA draft is considered one of the greatest ever, with 4 future first-ballot Hall of Famers selected. In the last year of the draft coin toss, the Rockets won the flip against the Blazers, who were in the market for a dominant center and really wanted that first pick. The best collegiate player in the draft was Hakeem Olajuwon, a nimble player with polished low-post moves, so nobody was surprised when the Rockets selected him with the first pick.
The Houston Rockets select Hakeem Olajuwon of the University of Houston.
Unable to get Olajuwon, the Blazers set their eyes on his Twin Tower teammate, Ralph Sampson. Sampson was the first pick of the 1983 draft and the reigning Rookie of the Year, who averaged 21 points, 11 rebounds, and 2.4 blocks per game in his first NBA season. Now, even though this was never officially confirmed, Olajuwon wrote in his book that the Blazers offered the Rockets Clyde Drexler and the second overall pick for Sampson. If the Rockets accepted this proposal, they could have had Hakeem, Drexler, and Michael Jordan, whom they could select with that second overall pick. If this had materialized, Houston could have been a dynasty that won championships for the next 15 years. But unfortunately for them, they rejected the trade. Still determined to get their center for the future, Portland settled for Sam Bowie, while the Bulls drafted Jordan. And even though Bowie was actually a solid center, his career was destroyed by injuries. And since he was drafted ahead of MJ, Bowie is often considered one of the worst draft selections ever. But just 12 years after MJ got picked third, his carbon copy was getting ready to take the NBA by storm.
No, I have decided to skip college and take my talent to the NBA.
When Kobe Bryant declared his intention to join the NBA straight after high school, not many teams cared because they thought he was too young. At the time, the Lakers GM Jerry West didn't know much about Bryant, despite Kobe being the best high school player in the country and scoring a $48 million endorsement deal with Adidas. Because he was so sure of himself and his talent, Kobe rejected workouts with several teams that had high picks in the draft, which was unprecedented. But Kobe did work out for the Lakers, destroying former Defensive Player of the Year Michael Cooper one-on-one.
To watch him work out, it was like ridiculous, okay? I mean, he was like a man playing against kindergarten people. That's how advanced he was.
However, the Lakers only had the 24th pick, and West knew that he needed to move in the draft to get Kobe. So he agreed to trade the beloved big man Vlade Divac to Charlotte, who had the 13th overall pick. But even though the Hornets agreed, the plan was still in jeopardy because somebody else could pick Bryant before the 13th pick. The Clippers, who had the 7th pick, loved Kobe, but they couldn't justify drafting a high schooler, so they picked Lorenzen Wright.
So I asked them why wouldn't they draft me. They said, well, we want to turn things around with our organization, and we felt like if we drafted the 17-year-old kid, then the city of Los Angeles wouldn't take us seriously.
The Nets had the 8th pick, and they wanted to select Bryant, but due to his Adidas deal, Kobe wanted to play in a big market, which New Jersey wasn't, so they acted. Both Kobe Bryant and his agent, Arn Tellem, personally called the Nets, threatening that Bryant would hold out and Tellem would sever all business ties with them if they drafted him. Now, Michael Jordan's agent, David Falk, also called the Nets and urged them to select his client, Kerry Kittles, also making threats that no one he represented would ever play for the Nets if they didn't select Kittles. So the Nets finally crumbled, selecting Kerry with the 8th pick.
Well, we really like Kobe, but for us right now, where we are and what we needed, I felt in the end it was Kerry Kittles.
This freed up the way for Kobe to fall to the Hornets, who then traded him to LA. And just like Kobe, the greatest shooter of all time nearly got traded on draft day. A few days before the 2009 NBA draft, the Warriors agreed to trade their number 7 pick in a package for one of the best big men in the NBA, Amare Stoudemire. The move was orchestrated by Steve Kerr, then the general manager of the Suns, who was looking to rebuild around that number 7 draft pick. But when that pick turned out to be Steph, the Warriors were getting cold feet. They never believed they would have a chance to draft Curry, and when they did, the Warriors backed out at the last second.
Our draft room erupted because we thought the deal was in place and Steph was going to be a Phoenix Sun, and it didn't happen. It fell through.
During the 2011 offseason, Golden State nearly traded Steph again, offering Curry to New Orleans for Chris Paul. But CP3 never considered the Warriors as a destination, and that deal collapsed too. Then, finally, in 2012, amid another losing season, the Dubs wanted to offload Curry to Milwaukee in exchange for the former number 1 pick, Andrew Bogut. All negotiations were set until the Bucks medical staff pulled the plug on the trade because they didn't believe Steph's ankles would hold up.
The doctor part, I can't put a name to it, but I know that was a part of the conversation because it all happened once for me.
Instead, the Warriors offered Monte Ellis instead of Curry, and Milwaukee accepted, believing they got an even better better player in the deal. In the next 2 seasons, Steph started cooking the league.
Milwaukee doctor, I hope he's still not the same doctor there.
And those Bucks doctors got fired. However, before Golden State won their first title, they nearly messed it all up again. In the 2014 season, after their first-round playoff exit against the Clippers, the Dubs wanted to add a star player, and they set their eyes on Kevin Love. Love was coming off a dominant season with the Timberwolves, averaging 26 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. But the only problem was that Klay Thompson would have to be included in the deal. Klay was not yet an All-Star, and Golden State was inches away from pulling the trigger. Thankfully, they also had Jerry West on the team in an advisory role, and Jerry threatened to quit his job if they traded Klay Thompson. The deal never went through, and less than a year later, Jerry's genius was proven correct when Klay and Steph raised their first Larry O'Brien trophy. But another decision that would have changed the Warriors and the NBA's history happened after the best regular season of all time. The Warriors went 73-9 in the 2016 regular season, beating the Bulls' 72-10 record from 1996. However, the record don't mean a thing without the ring. But even though Cleveland made a miraculous comeback, won the 2016 championship, and robbed the Warriors of a perfect season, it was counterproductive. Without the title, the Warriors were able to get Kevin Durant, whose next chapter certainly wouldn't be joining an NBA champion. KD wanted to be needed, and he was needed by the Warriors. With Durant in the lineup, the Dubs became virtually unstoppable, making 3 NBA Finals in a row and winning 2 titles. If KD didn't come to the Bay, LeBron James would probably have 1 or 2 more titles, which would then completely change the GOAT debate.
I'd say Kevin Durant.
However, when discussing the NBA GOAT,
well, I'm going to go with Michael Jordan. Okay. But statistically, LeBron James is a better basketball player.
Despite LeBron's dominance at the age of 40, for many people, the greatest ever is still Michael Jordan. Jordan came to the NBA at the same time as Commissioner David Stern, who marketed the NBA better than anybody else. Stern and MJ turned the NBA into a global brand, and a big part of that was the joint decision of FIBA and the NBA to allow professional players to participate in the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. 4 years earlier, the U.S. collegiate team wasn't strong enough to beat the rising talent of the world, only getting a bronze medal, finishing behind the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. So, to prove the greatness of American basketball, Stern and the American Olympic Committee decided to bring the best the NBA had to offer to Barcelona. Led by Michael Jordan, the Dream Team was the biggest draw of the '92 Olympics, and the whole world was finally able to see NBA stars in action. As for many people worldwide, this was the first time they saw NBA players play basketball. The impact the Dream Team had on the sport was unprecedented and changed the NBA forever. The 1992 Dream Team opened the floodgates for international players taking the leap and joining the NBA in what was one of the most impactful events for the NBA and basketball worldwide. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, we have another one for you right here.